So welcome everybody. Nice to see you all. This is our fourth session of the big ideas of Jewish prayer. And the purpose of these sessions, we're part of this larger series delving into the world of Jewish prayer, and we're doing classes, myself and David Schwartz and Cantor Figa. And our purpose is to really open up Jewish prayer and try and bring new perspectives and different ways of looking at everything. So today our session is going to be a little bit more text learning than we usually do, but in a very interactive way. And so our session is about the services, these services that we do all the time. Where do they come from? Jews pray very uniquely. We don't pray the same as Muslims. When you go to if you go to a mosque, their prayer is 15 minutes long, whether it's Ramadan or any other day. It's 50 minutes long and it's very bodily. And we don't pray the same as Hindus, who have a whole series of rituals and a puja. And we don't pray the same as Catholics, who have a mass with they do have readings, but they have a Eucharist and and all kinds of ritual. And we pray different. We have our own way of praying. And where does our way of praying? Where do our Jewish services come from? That's the subject of our class today. So we're going to begin. I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to come and we're just going to read these first two lines, which are from the Talmud, and we'll just begin to give us a window into where our sages placed these services. We've been praying the same way for 2,000 years, basically. That's a long, long time.
I can hold it.
Alan, would you mind reading for us these first two lines from the Babylonian Talmud?
Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, the prayer services were instituted by the patriarchs. Rabbi Joshua, son of Levi, said, the prayer services were instituted to replace the daily sacrifices.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So let's start with the one that's more not the one that we're going to be focusing on, but also very interesting. The prayer services were instituted to replace the daily sacrifices.
Yeah.
In what way and how?
What were the sacrifices? Exactly.
Simple.
In the temple.
In the temple, right? And what were the sacrifices like in the temple? Anybody remember?
They were animal sacrifices, sometimes a measure of grain, but mostly animals.
Right. Yeah, lots of animals and different kinds of animals, and we read about them a lot, right? There were bulls and
Wow.
And it was morning and afternoon,
yeah, very
and
nice.
Hi, Marcia.
not and hello everybody, and not evening, and then on Shabbat there was an additional offering, which they called Musaf, and we call Musaf, our additional prayer service.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
so-
the I go with Rabbi Yoshua.
Yeah, it seems very direct correlation, right? They had a musaf, we have a musaf. Of course, the question, I remember someone came up to me at Kiddush and had this realization. It's like, wait a second, how did they do an offering on Shabbat? Are you allowed to light a fire on Shabbat? How did that happen? And so the question is, yes, they did. They did have offerings on Shabbat, and you were allowed to have a sacrifice on Shabbat. But so we have it would can anybody give me a picture? What was it like? What was the sacrificial rite, which is the way we call the institution of the sacrifice in the temple, which went on basically for 1,000 years between the first and second temple. What was that like day after day?
A lot of blood.
That's
We don't ever talk about it.
Uh-huh.
But I think in one of our classes, whether I don't know if it was the Thursday morning or whatever, we read some description, but considering how many animals and the size of some of the animals and how frequently there was a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Mhm. There, go ahead. Well, there was a lot of blood, and one of the miracles the rabbis say of the temple times was that even though there was so much blood, it did not smell. And there was so many entrails. But so there was definitely a lot of blood, but there was a sense of it continuing day after day, right? Day after day after day after day, morning, afternoon, holidays, Shabbat, right? Day after this, for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's really an amazing thing when you think about it. It never stopped. You always had that pillar of smoke coming from the altar, from all the sacrifices that were made, and there were the priests who looked after the sacrifices, and it just was done. It was like clockwork, right? It created this kind of power of this ritual power day after day after day. So how is that similar to our services?
Before you say, I was just thinking, Abraham instituted the morning service. Next morning, Abraham hurried to the place where he stood before God.
Yeah.
So who's not to say that maybe standing there, God filled his soul with something? I've always believed God shows you the way to do things. Maybe it was God's way.
Beautiful. So I called that thought. We're going to get to that really soon, but that's exactly where I want to go with it. That it's exactly it. So, but let's stick with the services. So at least there is a part of our services are kind of like that, right? Day after day after day, right? The minyan is like that. For those of you who come to morning minyan, when Vladimir is there, he's like, we had 20 people today, and we had 17 people on July 14th, 1999. And we had, there's a sense of and when we don't have a minyan, it's like people's hearts are broken, right? There's a sense of it continuing day after day after day, kind of like those sacrifices, right? There's a flame going on, right? The Ner Tamid, the eternal light you had in the temple, and the Ner Tamid we have in the synagogue, and we try and keep it going. We feel a responsibility to keep those services going. And for those who are saying Kaddish and who really want to make sure they say everyone, you can go to any big city or even not so big city in the world, and you can look up a minyan, and that there'll be a minyan going on, like the service, like the sacrifices in the temple, and you can partake in it. And my Marshall's living in Jerusalem, and there's tons of those minyans everywhere. You just walk into a minyan, there's going to be a mincha mariv, there's going to be a shacharit, and you just know it's going to be there for you, so you can worship, so you can have your davening, so you can say Kaddish, whatever it is. It just keeps going on and on. I think you get that feeling at the kotel sometimes when there's like 10 different services going on, but you just feel even at night, there's people there praying, and it's kind of like this sense of keeping it up, right? This never ending ritual you keep up. It's different, but I remember in my travels in the East, hearing about a place and several places where they tried to keep up the chanting in the Hindu tradition of Om, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. So it's a common kind of religious practice. You want to keep it up, right? It's like a stream that you're feeding day after day after day, and that you can come in and join that stream, and you can be part of it. And I think it's one of the reasons it's really hard when our services are completely virtual and there's nothing in the building. It's not just like, oh, we're moving a program. We are stopping having services in the building. It feels like a big deal, at least to me.
But then also, don't we, like our patriarch was Mike Bass when he helped us find a slightly new way to do the service, even though it's still going on the same, but we added something to it with the new Siddur. Okay,
beautiful. Thanks so much. So the other thing is we're instituted by the patriarchs. So for you, if we talk about it, the patriarchs, to you, it feels like it's bringing something new. Somehow that's the difference between the two, or it's more personal somehow.
Mm-hmm.
The way I understand it is you have the actual concrete rituals that are what I would call the keva. But when I look at the stories about the patriarchs, each one of them had their own specific kavanah.
Okay, beautiful. A specific, it's also about bringing a kavanah, a spark to it. Go ahead.
As we were talking about, or Rabbi, as you were mentioning, the sacrifices that went on for hundreds of years, 7 days a week, in the temple, and relating that to some of our discussions in our earlier classes about keeping it fresh. How did they not get into just having it like an assembly line? How is it not rote and, it's like, oh, here comes another cow. Let's slaughter it and move on to the chickens or whatever. It just seems like it's going to be rote after a while.
It's really interesting, and it probably came down to the individual priests, right? Some priests were they did it in a rote way, and some priests managed to find a way to make it fresh every time, and some were in the middle. And I guess it depends who did it, and maybe there were moments where there was a lot of presence, and they felt taken up in the sacrifice. And there were some days where they said, "This is really early in the morning, and I wish I was sleeping, or in my village instead of in the temple doing the service." Or maybe that wasn't like that. Maybe the temple, it was so alive for them that it was powerful each time. I mean, there's a Kabbalistic theory that every time they killed an animal, the spirit of the animal was used, kind of taken up by the people to kind in their spiritually kind of and it gave them a sense of it being in a very primordial way, more alive.
Didn't people in those days think that sacrifices was equivalent to speaking to God? I mean,
yeah, no.
And a lot of religions from those days, they did sacrifices as a way of speaking to God.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really interesting to think about. Did they also speak to God the way we think of prayer, speaking to God? Did they do that as well, or was this just it was a different state of mind that we can't imagine, where this was just a way of communicating with God, and for them this just felt the most natural way to do it. And it could be that 1,000 years from now people will look back and say, what was that prayer thing? You mean they used to get together and say lots of words and sing, and we just kind of like close our eyes or whatever, and that's how we talk to God, or that's how we communicate with the divine. So it could, yeah, I often wonder that, where did it come from? But there is that sense of, depend on the priest really does kind of bring up the idea of personalization, which maybe the patriarchs does too. What's any other differences? What's the difference if the prayer services are instituted by the patriarchs and not the daily sacrifices?
Rabbi,
Sure.
They never sacrificed fish.
It's a good question.
Basically, they lived in a desert.
Well, they're not that far from the sea,
Right.
but it's a good question. I have a thought somewhere in my mind, but it could be that fish were not considered to be. I mean, it's different, right? Because you raise all the other animals. Fish are something you catch, right? Sheep and beef and even the doves that they would sacrifice were all animals that were kept and kind of for this purpose. Well, I'm not sure. I think, these days, obviously we farm fish, but I'm not sure if they did back then. I think fish then was just caught out at sea, or in the rivers, or maybe in the Kinneret and the Sea of Galilee. But it's a different, right? You don't sacrifice, animals. You sacrifice animals that are raised. That's an interesting thought and question. So one thought I had about it, first of all, when you think about where do our services come from, which we don't really perfectly know. I mean, the Talmud talks about it, but if you're saying it goes back to the patriarchs, you're saying it goes back a long way, right? You're not saying rabbis invented it. You're saying our services go back to the very beginning of our people, in a very, maybe our patriarchs didn't actually daven mincha and shachari, but there's something about the spark of each of those services which goes all the way back to that time somehow into there. Because I mean, speaking about talking to God, what's your impression from the Torah of how the patriarchs and matriarchs spoke to God?
Like Abraham, I mean, direct conversation.
Conversational, right?
Yeah. And I have to say, the way I was raised, that's how you prayed. Like you talked to God every day. You didn't have to wait to go to mass. You didn't have to wait for anything. You could actually just open up your heart at any moment.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, right? You just pray, and that's the way they spoke. And you don't get the sense that Abraham was going out to find a minyan to do shacharit or to, mincha, or he would or Sarah. They just walked, and when moments came up, they talked to God, and when they felt gratitude, they built the little altars and poured oil on it, and it was very
Personal.
yeah, it was very personal and quite concrete.
And God would hear them, and also God would see what they had done. So
Yeah.
If you look at Jacob sleeping with a rock, on a rock, and then waking up and saying, "Oh, I didn't know that God was here," and so I mean, that was something else.
It was very visceral in that sense, right? It was in the moment, and they felt God's presence, and said, "This is God, and God is there." And it was a lot less intellectual. Our process is more intellectual, perhaps, than theirs was. So let's look at these three. These are the three passages that the Talmud brings up as to where our three main services come from: Shacharit, the morning service; Mincha, the afternoon service; and Mariv, the evening service. Let's see. Norma, would you mind reading for us these three since we were starting?
Abraham instituted the morning service, as it says. Next morning, Abraham hurried to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Isaac instituted the afternoon prayer, as it says, and Jacob went out to meditate in the field toward evening. Jacob instituted the evening prayer, as it said, and he came upon the place. And that's really very generational also.
Well, so you said for Abraham, you liked the idea that he went to the place where he stood before the Lord. So you felt like he somehow received something from standing before the Lord, and he went back there, right? So
right, to a place he knew, where he had been directed to do something, and so maybe he felt that then he would get some guidance from the Lord, from God.
Beautiful. And he hurried there, right?
Yes.
And the Shakari prayer is a prayer that some people will get up early to pray Shakari just as the sun is rising. That's considered to be, you get the extra bonus points. Oh, I haven't been looking at the chat. Elizabeth. Okay. Okay. And what about the afternoon prayer? What do you think? Isaac instituted the afternoon prayer that says, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field towards evening. So first of all, just from a practical point of view, the Mincha prayer is done often just before evening, right? You do Mincha Mariv together, so that's toward evening, even though it's the afternoon prayer, but of course you can do it earlier in the day. And then we have Jacob instituting the evening prayer. So we have to really see a little bit more context for these, and that's what we're going to do. Okay. So for what I've done is, this is not the Talmud, this is me, kind of going more into depth for every one of these characters or one of our founding patriarchs, and getting into what's their association with this prayer service, and why is this? What does it mean that our prayer services come from them? What could it mean, and what could it mean to us today? So would someone read for us, please? This is a Midrash about Abraham.
I can read.
Thank you, Kay.
When Abraham was 3 years old, he left the cave and he thought in his heart, who created the heavens and earth, and who created me? He prayed all day to the sun. And in the evening, the sun set in the west and the moon rose in the east. When he saw the moon and stars that surrounded, he said, "This one must have created the heavens and the earth and myself, and these stars are its servants and ministers." He stood and prayed all night to the moon. In the morning, the moon sank in the west and the sun rose in the east. Abraham said, "There is no might in either of these. There must be a higher Lord over them. To her I will pray and prostrate myself."
So I added, I said him in the Midrash, but I put her because is it
Okay.
him, is it her, is it I'm, so this
What's
is
interesting is the question, when Abraham was 3 years old, he left the cave. Those are kind of, the questions he asked are kind of like the questions you said Shalva asked you.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Powerful questions though, right? He's like, well,
Yes, for a 3-year-old.
For a 3-year-old. So right, he's saying, well, where did all this world come from? And he looks, so he prays to the sun, but then the sun sets. So he's like, the sun can't be the main thing because the sun's gone. So then he sees the moon rise and he sees, well, it must be the moon. So he starts praying to the moon, but then the moon sets and he says, well, neither the moon or the sun must have created a world. So then he says, there must be a higher Lord over them. To her will I pray and prostrate myself. This for me, I picked this Midrash because I feel this kind of gets the Abraham's character in a powerful way. I don't know if anybody else feels that this is a good kind of Midrash for Abraham of who he was, always searching for truth and kind of looking in the world around him. And
Adir asked you those questions too about who made that house, who made that tree, did God make that? So
yeah,
kids haven't changed any.
that's true. Exactly. So I'm not sure if I hope Adir founds a new religion or Shalva or not, but it's not.
They're just curious.
They're just curious. So this is how I interpreted Abraham. Kay, please go ahead, read the rest of Abraham. This is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed.
So that's how I interpret Abraham's character on some level. That looking around and being amazed and seeing God and or the divine and everything. What anybody willing to share some moments where when they feel that radical amazement or have felt that radical amazement? I'll start with one that came to mind. Last Pesach, where we had a few guests over, including the cantor, for a Seder after the whole year of not, and we took off our masks for the first time, and saw people's faces in the year, and there was a sense of wow, here we are, we're alive, and look at another person's face, and look at it was wow.
Well, for me this morning, I had a moment of amazement when I took my dog Emblem outside in the snow, just looking at the way the trees were lined with the snow falling, the birds. It just was so peaceful. Nobody was out. It was maybe like 7 a.m. So nobody was out, and just the stillness and the glistening snow, it was just all so beautiful. And, I was just taking it in, and he's racing around and happy in the snow. It was just a beautiful moment to see all that.
Wonderful, beautiful.
Just reading Rabbi Heschel's in comparison to what we've been studying about what Kohelet said about how everything is futile. This is certainly a radical, amazing moment that feels so much better.
Well, just a moment of amazement, and I think most of us have been through it, is birth of a baby.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's when you really feel, everything is phenomenal and everything is incredible. The amazement of it. Yeah, I remember when Shalva was born, and it also was the spring, May 5th, and the whole world was waking up and sunshine was coming through, and it was just a whole amazement at all of life.
So I think amazement goes along with thankfulness. That when you're amazed, and it's just something that you're so that's so special, and sometimes it's very small things that you're amazed at, but the whole way of thinking about being thankful, both to God and to others in our lives.
Beautiful. Yeah, really the gratitude, as we see, right? Abraham, there is no might in either of these. He's looking at the wonder of the world around him. There must be a higher Lord to him will I pray and prostrate myself, right? That when you see those wonder, I mean, I had a moment in the last week, with children, you're so often just taking care of everything, but suddenly feeling the preciousness of being with my children, and having read on Facebook of several friends who have had stillbirths recently and feeling their pain, and just feeling their pain, and just gratitude and all these things at once, and a small moment that suddenly awakens that for one. What's the radical amazement part? What's the radical in amazement?
Everything is a miracle. That we're amazed. I went to the Garfield Park Conservatory for a walk this week, and just the diversity and the variety of different plants were like, this is a miracle. I was radically amazed just to take that walk.
Beautiful.
Or even going,
go ahead.
Even going to the shed aquarium, just all the different colors of fish and all the different types of fish. I took children there, but for me, it was just like totally amazing that all this beauty and diversity could exist just within the aquarium.
The moments where we're just touched by the radical wonder of life, and just how beautiful and wonderful it is, and just being alive and feeling love for other beings, or for the world, or for the Creator, and as Mike was saying, it leads to profound gratitude. I love how he says, get up in the morning, which is right with the other Abraham, right? He gets up in the morning, goes back to the place where God, and because that's, if you can start your day that way, then it has gives you a good day.
Being thankful for being alive. I think after you've gone to sleep, there is no guarantee that you're going to wake up. And being alive in the morning when you wake up, it's such a blessing.
I was listening to a On Being this morning with Michael Pollan, and he had talked to a psychologist. He was studying how plants affect our minds, and the psychologist sort of said to him that people, you get into your 60s, and the way he described your brain at that point is kind of like a hill where you're going down a hill in a sled, and then basically what happens is the sled makes tracks in the hill, and you go down those tracks. It's kind of like when you get snow on the road, you want to drive in those tracks.
Groove.
You drive in your car.
Sure.
He said, with some, some drugs, it is kind of like fresh snow, and then it covers up those tracks, and then you get to make new ones. So I think the whole idea of radical amazement is when you kind of get out of that.
Out of the tracks, out of the groove.
Yes.
Beautiful. I love that. It's like the radical amazement that shocks you out of just going into your groove, and kind of is like, hey, wake up, just be in the moment, like realize what's in front of you. It's like, don't go into your groove. And it's the Hasidic teachers talk about the concept of first light, which is the first thought you have when you wake up. If you can fill that thought with something like radical amazement, before your mind just goes down its groove, then you're in a good stead. Just you got to stop your mind from going to the groove. You have a split moment, and the Shulchan Aruch, our main body of our latest canonized text of Jewish law, says, "Wake up like a lion." It says, like, wake up like a lion. Like you get up and try and even if you're not the kind of person who can have that physical energy, maybe at least in your mind you can kind of just take a moment of connection, or a moment of just feeling amazement and of gratitude.
It's funny because I have one of these little stuffed animal things left from when my grandkids were little. And the one I like the best that I see the first thing in the morning is Rory the lion.
There you go. Love that. So you could get up and roar.
Yeah, right.
It's what you were saying about the grooves, which is so. And look at what Rabbi Abraham Josh Fishel says, and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted, right? Because the grooves are, we've been down them before, so it's everything is granted. But we wake up and say nothing for granted. And I think when he's saying everything is phenomenal, he's not just saying everything is amazing and that kind of phenomenal, but everything is happening, right? Everything is joy. And right, we say every day the Lord renews, right? Every day the Lord renews the world, right? We say it in our prayers. So every day the world is new, if we can see it. And God, and our prayers. There's a Shakari prayer, right? Abraham. We say every day the Lord renews the world with goodness. And then we quoted one of the most beautiful psalms, a psalm for Rosh Chodesh, which talks about God, kind of taking care of every part of life. The hills, the animals on the hills, the fish, the bears, everything gets what it needs, and everything goes around with God's blessing in the world. So a sense of just the beauty, the grand, wonderful beauty of the world, and that everything has everything has a place and a purpose, and is always alive, not just a groove, but everything is alive. So how do we feel that when we pray in the Shakari prayer in the morning? We have to maybe come with that mindset that this is what your prayer is about, and or try and find those moments, or try and steer our mind, because that's Abraham, right? So our Shakari prayer is, of course, like the sacrifice. It's every day we offer a sacrifice. Every day we do what we do. If you put on tefillin, you put on tefillin, and put on talit, you put on talit, and you go through the pages. But how about bringing the spark of radical amazement?
I'm always amazed at how many times we're blessing God, or blessing the things that God has given us. And we're always pointed in the direction of thinking about how we're blessed. And so, if you think about each of those things in which we're blessed in that way, and have radical amazement about each of those blessings, that's a nice way to wake up.
Beautiful.
Also the first prayer of the day before you even get to shul. In the old days, the moda'ani or mode'ani for men, it's kind of like the first thing you say. It's kind of like, thank you, right? So it's like, that to me, that is the trajectory for the entire day.
Beautiful, right? We're supposed to get up in the morning and say, I am grateful that you returned my soul to my body. And then right. the 10 blessings you say at the very beginning of the service, who clothes the naked, who opens the eyes. There was a certain point in time when those blessings were said literally by people, not in shul, but as they were getting up out of bed. So you'd be lying in bed and you would say, thanks you God for opening my eyes. And you open my eyes, I can see. And then you would get up and you could straighten my back. I can straighten my back. And you can't take that for granted, as we all know. And, thank you God for clothing me. And, not everybody has the ability both to do that. And we all have to find things we're grateful for. And thank you God for, go ahead.
For our senses.
I always like the first one of those blessings. Thank God enables the bird to distinguish between day and night. That's the very first one.
Yeah, when you have a rooster, you're not thinking your rooster. You're thinking, I want some fried chicken when that happens. But,
Here we are like the Muslims in this one line, there must be a higher Lord over them. To God will I pray and prostrate myself, which is the same thing that the Muslims do.
Beautiful. Thank you for pointing that out. Well, the truth is that the Jews, we used to, every time we do a bow, we used to prostrate. We used to do a full prostration.
Like at Yom Kippur, yeah.
Yeah, we used to do it. We used to do it all the time. But because the Muslims, they said, we're all about it. And we said, we've got to be different somehow. So it became bows. But it used to be a full prostration. I wonder what that would be like.
When I was in Paris for Yom Kippur a few years ago, everybody got down on the floor.
Oh, wow.
We did not, but we bent over, but we were stunned that people literally lay down on the floor during that.
Was it Orthodox or conservative?
Conservative.
That's interesting. Wow.
Adir knows the synagogue, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in Europe, conservative is more conservative than here religiously. But yeah, that's what I grew up with, which was everybody goes down, and you have to find your little corner in the aisles, and people bring a little carpet sometimes to bow because they don't want to be on the floor, and everybody finds their place. But it doesn't work very well in synagogue with pews, for one. But yeah, it's very powerful, and everybody does it, not just the rabbi and cantor. If you all want to do it, I won't say anything.
Well, it was interesting because we were quite dressed up, but most people came in clothes that were casual, and I wondered about it. But I guess when they're going to lay down on the floor, maybe that's why they just didn't wear clothes that would be fancy or hard to get down and get up in. So I don't know.
Interesting. Be interesting to see the difference between Shabbat and Yom Kippur, if Yom Kippur was less or.
Was that just Shabbat, Carol, not Yom Kippur, right?
Yeah, it was Yom Kippur. It was
Yom Kippur. Oh, okay.
Day. We were there for both Kol Nidre and then the next day for the service all day. And
interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I think part of there is a halakha, Jewish law, about dressing nicely for shul on Shabbat, that you should wear different clothes on Shabbat than you do the rest of the week. So there is something for that. But I wonder if also we took on some of the habits of the Protestant neighbors who dress really nicely for church on Sunday and the way we do it. And okay, let's go on to the next one. No, we won't have time. So that's Shachari. If we can if we can come to our Shakari prayer with that radical amazement in our hearts and minds, and the gratitude that's so connected, that's been nicely pointed out, then that really, if you do that for 45 minutes, like if you really read the words of the prayer, there's a lot of amazement, radical amazement in there, a lot of gratitude, a lot of blessing, a lot of, wow, look at the world, right? The whole Shakari prayer is God renews the world every day. And, thank you for establishing the steps of a human being. And thank you for giving us courage and for wiping out the sleep in my eyes. I love that. That's very concrete. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is Mincha. And would someone like to read this one?
I will.
Okay.
Marshall. Genesis 24. So they sent off their sister Rebekah and a nurse along with Abraham's servant and his men. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening.
So maybe before we continue on, just to give, that was me putting two verses to give a little context to the verse where Isaac goes out to meditate in the field towards evening. It's in that whole story where Abraham is getting old and he's like, oh, my son isn't married yet. And so he sends off his servant Eliezer to find a wife for his son. And Eliezer goes far away to where Abraham was from and finds, the Rebecca's, finds Rebecca, and Rebecca's father Lot, not Lot, sorry, her brother is Lot, but finds anyway Abraham's family, and they find, Eliezer finds Rebecca and then brings her home. Okay, but what's Isaac? He knows he's about to get married. He's never met his wife before, and he sees the camel coming from far away, or hears messengers that they're coming, and he's like, I'm about to get married, and upon us rests the whole future of the tribe and of the clan and everything. So what does he do? He goes out to meditate in the field towards evening. So what's the difference between this kind of meditation and the prayer of Abraham? And if you're talking, you're on mute.
It was like he's preparing himself for something.
Okay.
To calm his mind so that he's accepting of what's about to happen.
It's more personal. It's aimed at a thing that affects you.
Beautiful. Yeah, really great person.
Rather than the focus being outward, it now turns inward.
Right.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it's a very visual verse, right? He goes out and to meditate in the field towards evening. You can see him going out into the field he probably knows well, and kind of, going there like, okay, what now? Any other differences, everyone, between the two?
Well, it was longer what Abraham did. He stood and prayed all night.
That's true.
Yes. This was a shorter time.
Really interesting. Yeah. A moment in the day.
Also for Abraham, it was as a result of observations of the world around him, but I don't see that he wasn't confronted with a major life transition, while Isaac is faced with that in this moment.
Yeah, he's going through something. Okay, let's read the continuation. Marshall, if you don't mind.
Linda Sapidin writes, reflection takes time. We need time to consider, ponder, wonder, contemplate, meditate. We need time to discuss a problem, contemplate an idea, put our thoughts to paper, record our dreams, immerse ourselves into whatever subjects pick our curiosity. Then, and only then, will we become smarter and more enlightened. So if you'd like to become smarter or help your child to do so, be sure to set aside quiet time each day. Reflect on your day and reframe your experience with the aim of understanding something new about yourself, your interactions, and life in general.
Thank you.
In other words, retire when you're 20, so you'll have time to do all this stuff.
Yeah, right.
Or don't retire, just daven mincha every day. But find a moment, right, where you can do this.
The thing is, davening mincha isn't, well, I shouldn't say this like I'm an authority, but I never think of really, when I am praying as part of the service, having time to contemplate and think, and because I always feel compelled to follow along with the service.
Well, since we don't have a mincha service at the synagogue, we can, I remember at rabbinical school where we would have mincha every day, but we would never see the dean of the rabbinical school, Brad Artson, Rabbi Brad Artson, at the mincha, and we say, why don't you come to mincha? and he would say, I like to daven mincha by myself. And we would see him then that he would walk out, it was in Los Angeles. It was nice weather most of the time. And he would walk out in the gardens and we'd see him disappear for 10 minutes and in the afternoons often. And so that he was doing something like this. But I think of all the services, in some ways, mincha, even if we were to have it, when I was doing this, preparing for this class, I was thinking maybe we should at some point it's so easy to have a mincha now because it's all virtual, but maybe we'll try and have one in the coming weeks. See if people want to come to a mincha in the middle of a day, pop in for 10 minutes. Yeah.
Even if you just stop, I'm not one to say prayers so much before I eat, but if you're sitting down to dinner, take 5 minutes just to, be grateful and say, be amazed at the food in front of you. And you could work that into your day easily, really. And it might stop you. It might just make it more meaningful.
Beautiful. So that pause.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Pause that refreshes.
And for
I always,
go ahead.
The idea of doing kind of a diary, or I was thinking of there's a book about artists and how artists can develop themselves by keeping a journal. That kind of activity where you're reflecting. Special.
I always appreciated mincha, when I would spend time in Orthodox circles. It was a nice break in a day if we were out and about doing things. Mincha always had kind of a time essence too, because you have it always, like Rabbi said, it's combined with Mari, but we have to hurry up to get to that point before we're not able to say mincha anymore with the time. So, and it's the core prayers, right? It's a short prayer service. It's, Ashrei Shmona Esrei Aleinu at the core of it. But there is always, to me, a sense of, no matter what you're doing, you're stopping and pausing and having this thankful moment among your busy day. Versus in the morning, there's a longer time frame available to it. Mincha always seemed like, okay, we still have to do this. We only have so much time. I always thought it was a nice rallying gathering point, to say it, even though it's sometimes said, very, very fast, very quickly. It's not dismissive. Taking time for mincha, I always thought, that always had an impact on me. As hurried as it may seem on the outside, it was actually reflective to me on the inside.
And one of the definitions of prayer in Hebrew, hitpalel, right? It's hitpalel. It's a reflective. So prayer is reflective. So it's, when you're suddenly taking a break out of your day for 15 minutes, whether it's, let's say you wanted to, and I encourage everybody here, if you've never done a mincha, look up in a sidur, find mincha. As Michael was saying, it's ashrei, and then a midah, silent prayer, and then it's aleinu. And just do it, try it. Take 10 minutes and just kind of read through it and see how you feel afterwards. I think it's, it's reflective. And I find, just same as Michael was saying, often in the middle of your day, your mind can become very full with all kinds of stuff. And, whether it's, especially if you're going through a busy time of transition in your life, like as Isaac, but, every day, some days just are full, and that little break kind of allows you to refresh and to kind of, it's kind of like when you get stuck in the internet and you spend too much time just browsing around, you're like, okay, I need to refresh my head from all those websites, all the news, and you're just like, let me refresh my mind. Say a blessing before I eat, or say mincha, or something. Okay, let's get to our last one. Someone read for us, Mariv.
Jacob's prayer, Mari. Esau said to himself, let but the mourning period of my father come, I will kill my brother Jacob. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran and came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. He had a dream, a stairway set in the ground, its top reached to the sky, and angels of God were going up and down. And Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is present in this place, and I did not know it.
Okay. So we're saying earlier, right? So, but this is coming even more than the mincha, a place of transition, a place of need, right? What's his need?
I have to get away from his brother. He's
Well,
gonna kill
Yeah, his brother's trying to kill him.
him.
So he's run away. He runs away from his home. And so what's he thinking? He's having a hard time, probably.
Also, he's
So-
tired, he had to stop for the night.
Yeah. He's tired. He stopped for the night. What and it's when it says he came upon a certain place. That's where Mariv came from. So what was his prayer, do you think?
Well, I think his prayer is one where if he asked God to protect him, and if he protected him, then he would follow God's laws. And
Yeah. That's what he says, right? Protect me. But right, his prayer is, please God, help me, right? That's like his, just help me. I'm having a hard time, right? We talked about this the first time we had this class, right? The most direct prayer that most of us have said, even people who don't believe much in God, when you're going through a hard time, suddenly you're like, help me. We've all been there. Help me, please. So what's his response? What's the response of God? Does God help him in a moment, or what does God do? He has a dream, and
And
what,
he knows that God is present in this place, and he wasn't aware of that before.
Always.
yeah. So it's not like God actually comes down in a miracle the way God does at other times, and suddenly, kind of strikes down Esau so that Jacob can go back home, right? That doesn't happen, right? God doesn't change the circumstances, but what does he get?
You get some indication that God is there,
Everywhere.
that he's been heard.
That God is
Yeah.
everywhere.
God
Yeah.
is always there.
God
Yeah.
is everywhere, right?
Right.
And he gets comfort of a certain kind, right? He gets comfort. He gets a feeling that of something's okay, that everything is better, and that gives him what he needs to go on, right? He goes to bed at night in the middle of the night. He goes to bed all alone, fleeing from his home. Somebody's trying to kill him, trying to go to some place he's never been to before, in the middle of the forest. And he wakes up. I'm okay. It's going to be okay. His prayer was answered in some kind of way. Ed, do you mind reading? Can you read for us the next bit, please?
Psychological Perspectives on Prayer, edited by Leslie J. Francis and Jeff Astley. For example, when our subjects were ill, they did not pray for immediate cure. They prayed instead for help, trust, and blessing. Pratt concluded that there is a simple human impulse to pray, to cry out for the help we need, for the good we want.
Very, very, very human impulse. Maybe it's the deepest human impulse to prayer, right? We have moments where we're just grateful over the radical amazement of the world. We have moments where we turn inwards and try and meditate on the events of our life. And sometimes it's the nighttime and we're in Egypt and we're just saying, help me out there. Maybe that's the most powerful prayer. And so why is that the Mariv prayer? The
I
evening
think
prayer.
as you face evening and sleep, and you face the darkness, and it can be sometimes intimidating, or at a loss.
Mhm. Beautiful.
And sleep is sometimes equated with death
Yeah.
and mortality.
Especially if you live in a pre-modern society where there's, especially these days, you only have candles and you don't have that much light and it's really dark and there's wild beasts and there's armies and robbers and illness, and the night is a scary place. And I mean, I remember when I lived in Nepal and going to little villages in the Himalayas, and you're in a mud hut at night and you're in the middle of the Himalayas, and the nighttime, everybody goes to sleep at 8 p.m. because that's when the lights go out and there's barely any electricity. And, it's, I remember, I mean, in those societies, they slept on the floor, basically with very little mattresses. And a lot of people get bruises. And what they believed, the Nepalese, was that the bruises came from some village members who turn into vampires and bite their legs at night. But people,
Scary.
yeah, really. So people are, the nighttime is a scary time. You don't know what's happening at night. But for us too, the nighttime is always, there's something about the night that's more, children, they get scared of the night. The night's a scarier time.
I wonder if our Heron Rosh's got family gave him the name from
Mhm.
that place, because it means mountaineer.
Well, I wondered too, because, well,
Is that place in the mountains?
well, Haran was a place. I don't know exactly where it is actually, but it comes up in the Torah a bunch of times. And I wondered if that was where the name came from.
Yeah, I wonder. I have
But
to ask Heron next time I see him.
yeah, he pronounces it Heron, and it's Haran.
Haran,
People,
right.
people obviously call him Haran, but then you find out it's actually Heron. But
Right.
yeah, but so this is the evening prayer, right? A time, and so one of the prayers of the evening service is Hashkivenu, right? Which is, while I'm lying down to sleep, watch over me, God, and protect me and protect the Jewish people, and don't let pestilence and disease and sword and famine come get me. So we have that very, that's a prayer. That's one of the distinct prayers of the evening service, the most distinct prayer of the evening service. And it's also a quick service, but it's please watch over me, and please protect me, which is the other.
Well, I looked it up in Google, and it's actually today in present day Turkey, Haran.
Yeah, because it's where Abraham stopped, according to tradition, on his way from Ur to the Holy Land. So
Interesting. Thank you so much.
thank you. Well, pulling it all together, our services are like the sacrifices. They're this never-ending, the Ner Tamid, the eternal light. They're something we feed, a stream that we come into, something we never want to stop, something that gives us that sense of always there and never ending, day after day, after year after year. But there's also a spark to them, and we need to also bring our spark, as Suzanne was saying at the beginning, and they fulfill different human needs, and we should bring those needs into our services. A need to feel protected, a need to feel gratitude and radical amazement, a need to reflect on our lives. And if we don't find them in the services, to find them in other ways in our lives to express these, because we all need to express these in our lives. We all need to have radical amazement. We all need to, go into meditation and think about and process our lives. And we all need to have a way of feeling that we can reach out to the universe and feel presence in return that gives us a sense of it's going to be okay.
Marshall, it's good to see you.
Good to be seen. Good to see you.
See you too.
Yeah, wonderful to have you. Wonderful to see everybody.
Thank you so much. This was
Hey,
interesting.
Rabbi.
This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Very
Rabbi,
interesting.
Rabbi,
can you send out the sheet to us?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be good.
Thank you.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi. Good seeing all of you.
Thanks you.
You-